Welcome, everyone. I'm Karen Small, the Managing Director of the Alan and Joan Bildner Center for the Study of Jewish Life, and I am delighted to welcome you all here today. We are thrilled to be able to bring you an out-of-festival film program as part of the Rutgers Jewish Film Festival. And our program today is also sponsored by the Mason Gross School of the Arts. So we thank them for their sponsorship as well. Just to give you a little bit about the format for today's program, I will be introducing and speaking with Deborah Schaefer, the director of the film, Queen of Hearts, Audrey Flack. If you have a question, please put your question in the chat. There's a chat box at the bottom of the page. So put your questions in the chat and I'll try to read them throughout the program, but most likely towards the end, I'll look through the questions and then I'll post them to Deborah. We are very, very disappointed that Audrey is not able to join us today. Audrey had her second COVID vaccine yesterday and is not feeling well. So unfortunately isn't able to join us, but sends her regards. And we will tell you a little bit more at the end where you can go to see some of Audrey's paintings that are currently on display. I would like to take a minute to introduce Deborah Schaefer, who is an Academy Award-winning filmmaker. She began making social issue documentaries as a member of the Newsreel Collective in the 1970s. She co-founded Pandora Films, one of the first women's film companies, which produced several shorts. Her film, Witness to War, Dr. Charlie Clements, won the Academy Award for Short Documentary in 1985. And a number of her films have been shown in the prestigious Sundance Film Festival. She has also turned her hand to producing, has produced several award-winning films, including the Academy Award nominated short Asylum. She has been awarded a Guggenheim Fellowship and the Irene Diamond Lifetime Achievement Award by the Human Rights Watch Film Festival. And we are just thrilled that she's joining us here today. Welcome, Deborah.
Thank you, Karen. I thank everybody for coming. And it's really a treat and a pleasure to be here and to be able to talk about the film. And I will do my best to fill Audrey's very huge shoes. She's a treat, and maybe we'll come back someday together because
that would be fabulous. Maybe we can arrange something with the Mason Gross School for their students. That would be fantastic. So we don't know if most of you have seen the film yet. We assume you have. So I don't think we have any spoilers today in case you haven't, but certainly we'll be talking about a lot of the behind the scenes making of the film. The film is available currently at the Princeton Garden Theater in their virtual cinema. And I believe it's also on Amazon. You can see it in those two places currently. So Deborah, can you tell us, how did you meet Audrey and how did you decide to make this wonderful documentary?
Well, you know, I get asked this question, of course, frequently. And I think it's kind of a funny story because I had no intention. I didn't know much about Audrey when I met her. I met her through, I had a friend, we had been partners on, my previous film was called To Be Heard, and it's about a poetry writing workshop for at-risk teens in the Bronx. Completely different kind of subject. And Amy, who was one of my partners on that film and is one of the producers of this film, said, I've met this amazing woman and we have to make a film about her. And I said, okay. I mean, people say things like this to me all the time. We arranged to meet Audrey for coffee. And I remember it really vividly. And it was probably, let's see, it must have been in late 2015. And we went to a coffee shop on the Upper West Side. And she essentially told her life story over coffee in an hour and a half. She kind of hit most of the highlights that ended up, many of the highlights that ended up being in the film. And I really wasn't very familiar with her work at that point. I mean, I know some art history. I had studied some art history. I'd go to the museums, but I wasn't particularly well-versed in photorealism at all. but I was captivated by Audrey. I really, the only way to say it is I fell in love with her. I fell in love with her energy and her story. I just thought there's so much here um, about growing up in the 20th century, about the role of women in the 20th century, about being a parent and a working mom. I'm always very interested. You can tell, am I going on too long? Do you want me to?
No, it's great. You're answering all my questions, so this is perfect.
I told you I can talk for two. I'm not one of the documentary filmmakers of my era. Many of my colleagues do, films about themselves and their parents, what I call the grandmother films.
Mm.
And I never actually mind my own personal history directly for subject matter, but I've often made films about things that are very close to me that I'm really interested in. So really the problem that I was interested in when I met Audrey is the problem of older women artists. And because I've been making films for 50 years, so it's a long time, and how much longer, and how am I going to keep doing that? And I would say the biggest single inspiration for me about Audrey is she was, I think, 85 when I met her. She's going to be 90 in May, and she is still painting. She goes into the studio every day.
Amazing.
And work. She's been producing new work. She's changed direction yet again. She has a whole new direction in her.
I just watched the film again, and just watching her go up and down the ladder to get to the top. I remember there was a scene with a little girl in the gallery who asked her if she used a ladder to get to the top. And then we see her right up and down the ladder. Just incredible.
She is an inspiration to me. And so before I knew much about her work, I just was captivated by her and her story. And I was very fortunate. I partnered with my editor. The person who became my editor, Rachel Reichman, also became the co-director of the film. We had edited together previously a program for WNET about women in Rwanda, and we'd done some other things together, but it had been a while. And I enlisted her to help me put together a little fundraising teaser when we'd done some shooting. And it turns out she had a much stronger background in art history than I had known of. Her mother had been an art teacher. Yeah, it was great. Because I have to really give Rachel credit for insisting. I think it's a lot due to her that the film is not just like a biopic in the sense that we don't just do Audrey's, A, B, C, D, but we bring in what was happening in contemporary art movements and what was happening in the history of art. Not even just in Audrey's era, but I mean, we have a mini art history lesson in the whole film, really.
And that's what makes it such a rich film, is that we're learning about photorealism and about abstract expressionism really in the era and the times that she lived in it and beyond. And I think that's so fascinating. I knew nothing about photorealism, and now I feel like I just cracked the very, very beginnings of it. But also it's so important about women and women trying to make their mark in the art world. And when she talked about, you couldn't mention you had children.
Yeah.
You were looked down on. You didn't fit the mold of being like a man. I mean, it's really told the heart of the story.
I've heard other artists say that in other movies. I forget now if there's a recent movie out about, I think it's the film about Elizabeth Murray, says you were afraid to tell people you had children. It was
suddenly a strike against you that you can't.
We forget, it's really easy to forget. I mean, when I was growing up, when I was a little girl, I didn't know women. There were hardly any female doctors, maybe very, women were nurses when I grew up, or secretaries or teachers. But that was, I mean, my mother happened to have been a mathematician, which I guess is part of,
Right.
It was already unusual. That's part of how I ended up where I am. But, the world was so different in the 50s. And yet, in some ways, it also hasn't changed. I mean, I think it's still harder for women. It is definitely still harder to get equal representation. And, every time new festival lists come out or new prize winners, now it's just beginning to be kind of more equal in the documentary world, but it has been a slog. And in the feature film world, forget it.
Mm-hmm. So absolutely. And we're just beginning to see more women really recognized. I know in our festival this past year, one of our films had a completely, the whole cast and crew, sorry, not cast, but most of the cast and all the crew were women. And when we interviewed the director, she made a whole point of telling us about that and how great that was to be able to bring in all women.
I have made a point almost my entire career. I've worked with male cinematographers overseas when I've filmed in foreign countries, whatever. But I made a point of looking for a female cinematographer for this film because I kind of figure, you know, if I'm not going to make the effort to make sure that women are employed at high levels of productions, who's going to do it? I mean, if I don't do it, who is going to? So, and in fact, my partner on the film was a woman, and both the other producers were women, and the cinematographer was a woman. In fact, we joke we had a male sound person who also did some additional cameras. So we used to tease him about honorarily being on
now, right. So can you tell us a little bit about the? So there were a lot of early pictures of Audrey and even some film clips and some interviews. Were those hard to find? Did Audrey supply those? How did those?
No, the photographs she had at her studio, they were just in boxes and old albums. And again, Rachel was really a bulldog with this stuff. We told Audrey we needed to come up and go through her old albums, you know, and she was ready for us to leave after an hour or so. We said, no. And actually we went, I think 3 of us, we took an associate producer and we took a scanner up with us, and we were scanning stuff as we went, and we borrowed things from Audrey. But the footage, like that footage from the video data bank, my editor found that by noodling around online.
Wow.
She went down to the Smithsonian to dig through there. They have a lot of Audrey's papers. Audrey has now donated the rest of her sort of personal art archive to the Smithsonian, but at the time they already had a lot of her materials. So Rachel took a train down and a good camera. And you know, these days it's so easy to duplicate stuff. If you have an iPhone with a really good camera, you can just make a really great photograph of a flyer, of a leaflet, of a poster for an exhibition. So we dug around a lot of places. And then the photographs of old New York, we of course had to look everywhere to find like the old Woolworths and Washington Heights back in the day. And there were some fun stories we had to leave out. Audrey had told a story about her father being a polar bear swimmer. You know what those are? The guys who run into because she was actually born in Brooklyn, not in Washington Heights. And her dad used to go with the polar bear swimmers in Brooklyn and dash into these. So we found some old footage of that, but in the end, we couldn't use, you know, every great story we had. But I love archive footage. I've done history films, archive films, and I just, you know, you can't have too much of it as far as I'm concerned.
Well, it gives us such a different glimpse into her past and what it was like for her, and at different times, her voice and her image at different times in her past, which really adds, you know, to the story. I was thinking about when, you know, she talked about the refrigerator mother, time, or being called that or referred to that, and the difficulties of having a special needs child. So I was did a little noodling around of my own about refrigerator mothers, and I didn't know anything about the film. So there's a film made called Refrigerator Mothers.
That's where we got the footage. I knew about the film because it's made by a group called Cartemquin Films out of Chicago, and they're kind of contemporaries of mine, the people who founded that group. And it's the same people who later were the exec producers of Hoop Dreams and of many very prominent documentaries. They've just spread out all over Chicago and trained. But anyway, I actually knew about that film. I didn't know that Audrey was in it. I didn't know that for my film. Audrey's actually had been one of their subjects, but we didn't use that part of their footage because we didn't need Audrey in a group discussion with other parents. I mean, it just didn't work for us. But they had the clip of Bettelheim talking about the refrigerator mothers on the Dick Cavett show, which was extraordinary. And you know, they were very, very accommodating. They remembered Audrey, and you know, they were very accommodating with us about arranging for us to have the copy and the rights and everything.
Wow, that's terrific. And there was a little I don't remember now if it was a clip or a written piece of an interview who talked about Audrey's other daughter, Hannah, had supplied some of the song lyrics that they used in the film.
Oh, in the Refrigerator Mothers film?
Yeah.
You must have, I didn't even realize that. That's amazing.
So interesting. It was just, I'll have to find it and send it to you, but anyone can Google refrigerator.
I'll send it to Audrey. I bet Audrey's forgotten.
It'll come up. It was so that Audrey had suggested it and they're like, no, but then they loved it and they used it in the film also. So
that's one thing I'll tell a funny story that Audrey would tell if she was here, because so, you know, the way I grew up in filmmaking, there was enough kind of influence of journalism and of broadcast standards and things that it was a real taboo. It's a real taboo to let somebody who's in the film, who the film is about, see it while you're working on it. You cannot allow them to comment. I remember CBS years ago got in terrible trouble for letting one of their interviews on one of their films about Vietnam see it before the film went to air. And it just was a big brouhaha. So Audrey kept saying to me as we were starting to edit, so when can I see it? When can I see it? And I kept saying, no, you can't, you know, no, you have to wait, you have to wait. And it actually became a real tug of war between us. And Audrey, as you can imagine, is very persistent. So she developed this funny line. She started saying, well, what's wrong with it if you won't let me see it? Something must be wrong with the film. I can't see it. And I, you know, we put it off until I showed it to her about a week before the film was finally done. But there was, I can't remember what the story I was going to tell you was about why that was, what were we talking about? Just
well, I wanted to ask you what Audrey's response was when she saw the film.
She loved it.
She loved it.
Yeah, she still loves it. She tells me now all the time, Deborah, she told me today, she said, Deborah, you made a great film.
That's great. Was she surprised by anything in the film? Which was one of the questions I was going to ask her if she was with us today.
One of the things she said when she's asked, you know, what her reaction to the film is, I don't think she had looked at a lot of the pictures of Melissa from before for a long time. And somehow for her seeing them collected there, it moved her a lot. It still moves her. You can see that it's difficult for her to talk about Melissa.
Yeah.
And Melissa's in her 60s now. And it's a very, you know, it's painful. It's been really painful for Audrey as a mom, and she really worries about what's going to happen when she's not around. Sure. And
this must be hard for her during COVID that she can't visit her.
Sure. She has not been able to go for a long time. And also her husband is not really well, Bob, who was doing, you know, most of the driving when they went, and who has been an incredible support to Audrey. And, you know, once in the latter part, once they married, and her life became much easier, because it was she was almost a single mother even when she was married before, and she had 2 children and one of them was disabled, and then she was a single mother for a while and working several jobs and painting at night. I mean, that's her whole explanation of how she came to photorealism was absolutely a necessity. She couldn't paint when the kids were awake. She couldn't go out to paint. Somebody had to be home, so she painted from photographs.
She found a way. She found a way to express herself in art through a different way. Yeah, just incredible.
Oh, I knew what story I was going to tell. It was about the band. It was about music, because one of the things she kept insisting had to be in the film. Audrey has a band called the History.
Oh, which we see at the very end of the film. We see.
Well, at the end, it's her and Hannah playing. She plays the banjo with her daughter, and we had to choose between that scene, which was a mother-daughter scene, or including the whole band, which is a very different kind of, they do these very funny satirical songs about, she has one about Jackson Pollock and one about Vincent van Gogh and one about Rodin and how he treated, I forgot her name, the woman who they ended up putting her locking her into an insane asylum for most of her life. And just, you know, Audrey has these very pointed, kind of very funny, outrageous songs. But if you there is a DVD available now, Queen of Hearts, And there are bonus features on the DVD.
Oh, cool. Okay.
And I think the polar bear story is on the DVD, and the band is on the DVD. And, you know, things we had to leave out of the film. You can never use everything in it. But Audrey she's still mad that I didn't put the band
In the film. Well, I thought it was a lovely ending with her and her daughter.
We did too, or we wouldn't have done it. I mean,
Sure.
We had to stick to our guns, you know.
Of course. Someone just asked a question of if Audrey painted at night and her children were awake during the day, when did she sleep?
She didn't.
She didn't sleep.
And she still, you know, when she was getting ready for that show, we don't make as much of it in the film as I had thought when we started this film. My idea, this is how films go. I thought, okay, she's starting she was just starting that big painting, that canvas that she says had been blank for 36 years sitting in her studio. And we knew, I guess, she had a show coming up at her gallery and that she was going to finish that painting for that show. So my idea for the film was the film would begin with beginning the painting and end with the show and the painting itself being a huge success. Well, things never turn out exactly the way you think, but as she was building up to that show, which must have been in the spring of, I get the years mixed up, probably 2017, she painted almost night and day for weeks getting ready for that show. She was out at her Long Island studio and she just was going, she slept maybe a few hours a night. She was just in the studio and she produced 6 or 7, a bunch, the smaller paintings that are in that show, she produced during that period of time, as well as finishing the giant one that's called Fiat Lux that she's working on in the very beginning. And we see it finished at the gallery. It's in the background at the gallery.
Oh, amazing.
Yeah, no, she can still do, she can.
And that's since she was 87.
Yeah.
Amazing.
She could do it now, I'm sure, when she gets over her shot. She can just
get back in there.
She can deliver.
Right. Deborah, can you tell us more about Audrey's background and her Jewish upbringing, and how did her Jewish heritage influence her work at all?
Well, I think Audrey would tell you if she was here that she's very Jewish, that she feels very Jewish. She very identifies as Jewish, but she would probably say, as I would, that she's not a religious person. I don't believe she goes to services, certainly not regularly. I think her father did, her parents did, and she did as a child. I just think it's part of every fiber of her being, actually. I think what happened is when she started going to Europe and was very influenced by the European Baroque, I think she was attracted to most of the iconography she was seeing was Christian, was Catholic, because that's what there is. That's who was commissioning paintings in the Renaissance period. And that's the art she was seeing was mostly not, it was Christian art. And I think Samantha Baskind, who's interviewed in the film, who's a scholar of Audrey's work, I think had a really profound insight when she talked about what she thought was Audrey's attraction to the Macarena images, to the Weeping Madonna, that I don't even think Audrey herself had realized. Audrey felt drawn to it and reproduced it, took those photographs of the statues in Seville and in other places and painted the Weeping Madonna over and over. But I don't think Audrey herself realized how personal it was, that it was a mother weeping for her child. And that Audrey just, it was like a knife to her heart. And it has nothing to do with iconography. Yeah. And at some point she does even say in the film, she realized she hadn't painted much. She hadn't really overtly painted much Jewish themed stuff. I don't know if you caught it in the there's a drawing from when her father died there's a Jewish star on the coffin.
Oh yeah.
In that drawing. And then
there were a few times.
And one of her early paintings was Matzah Meal, and that was when she was first starting to paint in her, at home, her sort of realist paintings. When she finally, she was able to break from abstraction. And then, the World War II painting is one of her masterpieces. It's
Yeah, and it was such a moving line. I think, I don't know if it was before or after you showed the painting, she said, I decided to paint something for my people.
Yeah, I had to do something.
Yes.
Yeah, and it's a magnificent painting. And there is, I mean, there's little symbols hidden, tucked here and there all through her paintings. And one of the newer ones, one of that series I was talking about that's in the gallery is very, it's a figure of a female with a headband, and there's all Jewish stars in the, she's very conscious of using the iconography, but Audrey is like, as any true artist, she's so eclectic. You cannot confine her to you can't use like politically correct or strictures, or she is just so much her own person and so free thinking. She just free associates and comes up with new connections and sees things in her own very, very, very unique way.
Yeah, well, I'm just thinking about the juxtaposition in the artwork of a family portrait in the corner, a deck of cards, a lips, things that I don't think most of us would put together and it comes out in this masterpiece. It's just amazing. I did love how there were many times a little photograph. Clearly, it was loved or cherished and it showed up someplace.
Often it's herself. Often it's herself and Melissa. Often it's her mother.
Mm-hmm.
And her mother was a gambler. I think we say that in the film.
Say that, yeah.
Yeah, we had more. We had so much more about that we couldn't use. But and Audrey herself, when I first met her, she and her husband they were traveling to Las Vegas to play cards.
Really?
Wow. And I had a fantasy of going with them, but you're not allowed to film on the floor in those. Oh, it would be very forbidden because of security, other people's security concerns and things like that. So
right.
Anyway, and they pretty much had stopped. They really pretty much stopped doing it.
Is that related to the name of the film?
Yes. Oh, yes, totally. It's a kind of a double entendre for me. I came often naming a film is one of the hardest things for me. I find it very, very difficult to come up with a good name. And this one I came up with pretty early on. We filmed, Audrey had a regular, like a monthly poker game with this group of, a very mixed group of friends on the Upper West Side. They were all ages, all professions. I don't know how she fell in with this crowd. It was just a group of people who got together and played poker. So early on, we filmed a poker night, and I think there's just a couple shots from it are in different montages in the film where you'll see a close-up of cards going by or somebody's hands or something. And we couldn't really make a sequence out of it, but that night, as she was playing poker, I thought one of her paintings is called Queen, the one actually that's now the poster for the film. It's a very colorful, she has one called Gambler's Cabinet. And so since card playing was such a theme in her life and love is such a theme in her life, and so the Queen of Hearts, it's a playing card. It's Audrey herself. Audrey, I tell her she herself is the Queen of Hearts.
Yeah, no, it's great.
We both wear, I found this locket while I was making the film. It's from my childhood. It's a little heart locket that I wear all the time now. She often wears a heart.
I saw her in a couple of interviews wearing a different heart each time.
But she has many.
Many hearts. Can you tell us what kind of painting or work she's working on now?
Yeah, I would say it's a continuation of what she started with the Fiat Lux painting. It's very much mixed, using like a classical painting, the way she used the Rubens, the Garden of was it called? The Rubens Garden of Love, anyway, there's the Rubens painting, and then there's all the contemporary cartoon figures flying in on the top. The one at the very, I don't know if I think it's the very last shot of the film, very near the last shot, there were 2 blank canvases in her studio, and one of them is the one she's painting during the film. And the other one, she goes up to very near the end of the film and sort of swipes her hand across the canvas. And actually, when I saw her do that, I knew that was going to be the last shot of the film. I thought, what a great, she's thinking about the next painting. Now she's completed that painting. The one that she started then is 4 Horsemen of the Apocalypse. And she uses a Dürer, the under part, there's the 4 Horsemen from a classic painting. And then a lot of, that one sold actually pretty quickly. And, you know, it's got a lot of very contemporary, you know, references to climate catastrophe and sort of, you know, a lot of, it's very colorful, and you might be able to find it. Her gallerist is, her gallery is Hollis Taggart, Hollis Taggart, and that, there might be a shot of that painting on their website. Audrey also has her own website if people want to, it's probably audreyflack.com. If you Google it, you'll find it.
Yeah, so we could see her work there. Do you think the newest piece is up on her website?
I hope it is. I hope they've gotten it photographed and put it on her site.
Oh, that would be amazing. Hannah, if you're still on the call, if you can look that up and let me know, you could share your screen in a little bit. We can show it.
Well, that'd be great.
If you can find it. Let me know.
You know, the other, I mean, Audrey has so much. I did a long sequence of her doing a drawing, and there's a few shots of it in the film, but you know, she does a lot of other, she still does these wonderful drawings. The one that has, there's a head of a guy who's kind of screaming, and then next to it, there's a kind of deconstructed riff on the de Kooning, the famous de Kooning woman with a bicycle painting. I mean, that was, I wanted to just say, I didn't say it before. The other thing that attracted me to Audrey is what a great teacher she herself is. Just the way she talks about art history, the way she talked about de Kooning, the way she talked about abstract expression, the way she talked about Jackson Pollock and what he was actually doing. It's like, it's just, it's so illuminating. It's so eye-opening. Her students just are crazy. I have met so many of her students who talk about what an incredible influence she was on them, and still
How
is.
lucky they are.
Yeah, yeah. And a lot of them have seen the film, and they'll write to her, and you know, she forwards the notes to me. And
let's see. She wants to repeat the name. So I'm asking Hannah, when our staff is on here, to look for the painting. Should she look at audreyflack.com?
She should,
or the name of the
try audreyflack.com, or she could try Google. The painting is called Fiat Lux, Fiatlux. Oh no, the newest one is Four Horsemen of the Apocalypse.
So try Four Horsemen of the Apocalypse by Audrey Flack and see if you can find that, Hannah, and I'll bring you back up, and then you could share it with us if you find it. Just let me know. We haven't done this before. I just thought of it now, but
yeah, no, it's great. It's a great idea.
If she can find it, we'll show it to anyone. So I'll just remind everyone who's here, if you have a question, please type it in the chat and I'll share it. Okay, someone asked, Nancy asks, where does Audrey teach, and is she still teaching? And in the film, we saw it in the very beginning, she had a class of students who came.
Yes, that was at the New York Academy, which is down on Franklin Street in Lower Manhattan. And I believe that's where she's teaching now. She's teaching on Zoom. It's gone to, she's not teaching, you know, live.
Person, sure.
Yeah, but, and it's interesting, I think partly, so I have a couple of good friends who are painters, and one of them has a very good friend who turns out had been a student of Audrey's, and they had kind of lost touch. And because of me making the film, the two of them have reconnected, and that former student of Audrey's, who is herself now is a successful painter, is helping Audrey with some of the teaching. I think she's co-teaching with her.
Oh, cool. Oh, that's so great.
Yeah. So, but I bet if people are interested in trying to get classes with her, you can forward a request to me through Karen, and I'll get it to Audrey, or try looking up the New York Academy.
Okay, so we're going to see how my technology works here. Give me 1 second. So Deborah, is this, this is Days of Reckoning.
Yeah, that's, oh, she changed the name. That was Four Horsemen of the Apocalypse. That is the Four Horsemen. That's the most recent one, and it sold really well.
Wow.
I just want to tell you, it sold quickly and sold very well. Well, and it's huge. Look, 72 by 96.
Right, we see that here. Wow.
That's one thing, you know, we were chatting a little earlier, what I want to say to everybody. Oh, Fiat Lux, I see, is coming up below too.
Yeah, and here we can see right, some enlargements of some of the pieces and some of the drawings. And then
where does she come up with this stuff? I mean, yeah, this is the one that was the
so this is the one we saw her working on during the
film. Yep.
Right. And you know, we remember that commentary about the gold, right? And this was, if everyone remembers that, here's the gold. And she said it didn't quite take, but the light gets through. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know what else.
That's how the light gets in the crack. Yeah, the crack. There is a crack in everything. Yeah, this is from the last show. This one I think is called Melancholia. Yeah, I see the name up there. This is one of those ones when she was working all night leading up to that show that she was working on. The one with the Jewish headband that I was talking about might be in this collection, because it should be, because it was sort of the same. Yeah, there it is. The one with the orange in the background.
Oh, this one.
Yeah, look at her headband.
Oh, it's titled Sarah.
Yeah.
Wow, and the angel.
That's a beauty. That is
beautiful.
Beauty. One of the things I was, when I was chatting earlier today, getting ready for this with Karen, I'll say that, in terms of the size of the paintings, I urge everybody, if you can, I must say, I'm very proud of the film and I think it came out really well, but it doesn't do the art justice. You cannot really, really fully appreciate the artwork on a film screen. It's so big, and even myself, I had seen it. I'd been studying the art and working from slides and reproductions. And when we went out to Long Island for that show where they had the Wheel of Fortune hanging, it was just breathtaking when I saw it in person. When I was standing in front of it, and the painting itself has its own, even though it's a two-dimensional painting, it's 3D. It has its own depth and life and vibrancy, and there's just no substitute for it. I'm sorry, the best filmmaker, cinematographer, whatever in the world cannot really recreate for you the experience of being in front of the art, no matter how good they are. The most I could do is get you to go see it.
Right. Well, so Deborah, tell us everyone who's joining us, where could they go now? Probably not now, but soon.
Well, they can go now. Actually, we had the loveliest surprise. The Museum of Modern Art reopened, in the fall, maybe, after it had been shut down for some months for the pandemic. And Rachel, who I was mentioning before, my partner on the film, went, she has an artist membership because of whatever. She went to a private opening just for artists when the museum first reopened. And she's working her way up to the 5th floor, which is where most of their famous contemporary art has always been hung, the Matisses and the Picassos. And coming up the escalator onto the 5th floor, you get off the escalator, and there is Audrey's painting, Leonardo's Lady, which she painted in 1974. The museum bought it in 1975. It's the first photorealist painting that the Museum of Modern Art ever acquired. It may be the first photorealist painting that any major museum ever acquired. It has been in storage for most of the years since then. And we did not know they were going to rehang it.
Wow.
And it's, Rachel immediately took a selfie of herself in front of the painting and sent it to us. And Audrey did not know, they had not told Audrey. The curator had not told her they were going to hang it up.
Oh, wow.
So it's, in fact, Audrey said to me before, if I tell people to go see the painting, she said, and then they should write to the museum and tell them how much they liked seeing it there, because the museum is rotating art in and out a lot. And so we don't want them to take that one down.
Sure. Okay, now everyone here, you are charged with going to MoMA, seeing the painting. I guess you can't miss it, it sounds like.
No, you can on the 5th floor. You have to go up to the floor. Also, the thing that if people haven't been to museums, Rachel said to me early on, I was very dubious about going to a museum, but it's one of the things I first, did when I felt like I could, as I started going out a little bit. It's timed entry, it's with a mask, the museum is empty. It is such a pleasure after so many shows that I had to try to struggle to see the work crammed in with a crowd, going to a museum right now is a huge, huge treat.
Wow, okay.
And I've been to MoMA several times. I've been to the Whitney several times. And, I think it feels very safe. I believe I'm being very, very cautious. And
well, thank you for sharing that with us. I think it's important to hear from someone who's gone gone out and been to places that they do.
No, I've been many times. I just went back to the Whitney, just had a magnificent show about the American about the influence of the Mexican muralists. It's closed now, but it was the influence of the Mexican muralists on the abstract expressionists. And it's a brand new idea to most people. A curator at the Whitney came up with. It's a beautiful show. I saw it twice. I saw it a year ago, and I saw it just now before it closed, but it's unfortunately gone. But yes, go see art.
Go see art. And did you mention there's also
she has a painting
on Long Island?
Yes, at the Nassau County Museum, which I'm not sure which town it's in, but you can look it up. But in the Nassau County Museum, there is a show called Heroines of Abstract Expressionism, I think is the name of it, Audrey said. Yeah, Heroines of Abstract Expression or Expressionism. And Audrey is has a painting in that, one painting amongst the group. I'm not even sure which work it is.
Nassau County. Okay, so check that out, everyone here.
And if anybody, you all are not that far from Philadelphia. The World War II painting now is in the collection of the Pennsylvania Academy of Fine Arts. They have.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, that's where we went to film it. We went. That was the other thing I felt with those big paintings. We had to film that Vanitas series live. I could not. That's why there are people walking in front of the painting. And so World War II, we went and filmed in person. I hired somebody in Arizona, sort of directed them on remote to film the Maryland painting, which is at the University of Arizona in Tempe, hanging in a stairwell. So it's a little hard to shoot. But we managed.
You managed, right, right. Do you know if there's any of Audrey's work in Los Angeles? Somebody is on our call today who lives she's from Philadelphia, or he or she, I don't know, living in LA.
If you forward a request to Karen and she forwards it to me, I'll find out for you. Okay. You might be able to find out on Audrey's website. I would imagine. I know that actually, it's a funny story. I have a niece who works at LACMA in a different department. That's the Los Angeles County Museum of Art. And they own a couple of Audrey's drawings, but I don't believe they're on display. So I don't know if at one of the other museums, if there's anything hanging. And her sculptures are in a lot of places. I mean, the Recording Angels in Nashville, Tennessee, and the Scales of Justice is in Tampa, Florida. They've just done a show of Audrey's work in Tampa, and there's those wonderful, the Civitas paintings that are in Rock Hill, South Carolina. So the sculptures are all over the place.
The ones in South, those are just so beautiful, yeah. The statue. And since Audrey hadn't seen them since they'd aged, it was so wonderful to see her response.
Yeah, we filmed there for 3 days. I have so much more material from that trip, but we couldn't use it all.
Right. Yeah, of course you can. So a couple times Deborah mentioned that if you want other information or to be in touch, to email me. I just put my email in the chat. It's ksmall@rutgers.edu. So please feel free to send me an email. I'll pass it on and put you in touch.
Yeah, we'll try to answer any of your questions.
Wonderful. Thank you. Well, Deborah, thank you so much for being with us today and sharing your perspective, the behind the scenes, your enthusiasm. It's really wonderful.
My pleasure. I was just talking to one of my producers this morning, and we were talking about what we're going to do, anybody's going to do next. It's so hard in this climate. And raising the money, by the way, I didn't mention, but I mean, I never even got the funding I needed for this film. I ended up paying for it a lot. Wow. Out of pocket, which I've never done. In fact, I think it's a no-no. It's a huge no-no, and I did it. And I still owe people money who worked on it. But anyway, it's a big.
It's so hard. And then you were hit with the pandemic, where
and it really has
couldn't even present the film.
Yeah, it's impacted our distribution, no doubt about it. But I would love to do a series on women painters. I mean, if somebody came to me tomorrow and gave me a blank check and said, okay, pick the 10 female painters throughout history that you would like to do films on, boy, I would jump headfirst into it right now.
Yeah, well, that would be amazing. Also, different time periods.
Yeah, it would be fun.
That would be really fun.
Yeah,
that would be great. All right.
Thank you all.
Yes, people here will please share my compliments. They said in the chat. They love the work. Also got some compliments on your pillows behind you, so colorful and beautiful.
my Guatemalan fabric.
Yes, yes,
Antique Guatemalan fabric.
compliments for that. Well, thank you
Okay.
again. It was lovely to talk to you.
If you didn't see the film, please do.
Yes, you still have a chance to see
Yeah,
it.
we do.
I'll just repeat again, the Prince and Garden Theater in the virtual cinema program. If you enter the code BUILDNER, there's a discount on the ticket, and it's also available on Amazon Prime. If you have,
And iTunes. iTunes
and,
also.
and iTunes. Prince and Garden Theater is one of our film festival venues, so they were very cooperative in putting the film up since we were going to be having this discussion. So we appreciate their efforts.
Well, thank you so much, Karen.
Oh, you are welcome.
And
Please
Sarah.
send our best to Audrey.
I will. She's going to be sorry. I mean, she is sorry. She likes doing this too.
Yes, well, we are too, but we hope we'll get to meet her another time.
Me too. Okay, thank you.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.